have a very unsexy topic to talk about tonight. So, pelvic floor therapy is something that I have recently started working on, and I have learned so much. And I won't tell you all that I have learned, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I feel like this is something that we don't take seriously, especially as women, and we need to take this very seriously. Now, because I'm not an expert on the topic, I've written out some notes so that I don't get anything wrong, because I don't want you breaking yourself based on what I say, and I want to give you accurate information. So excuse my going to paper for details here. So being in athletics, I heard a lot about people saying, oh, I pee when I deadlift, or I can't take long car rides because I constantly have to pee, and I don't even drink that much water. I pee when I sneeze, and these things are passed off as normal. It's normal when you're lifting weight off the floor to pee a little. It's normal when you are aging to lose the ability to control your bladder. And none of those things are true. And I didn't know that for a very, very long time. I started kind of realizing it just with the research that I had been doing, but my experience dictated otherwise. But again, because I sought out help in this area, I learned why. I was experiencing all of those things. So first of all, what the pelvic floor even is a group of muscles that attach basically from the front to the back. So from the front, back, and sides of the pelvic bone all the way to the sacrum, like a hammock that sort of contains everything. So your bladder, the uterus, prostate, rectum, they wrap all the way around the urethra and the vagina as well. So these muscles all must be able to contract and relax. So we need to contract them to maintain continence and to hold gas in, but we also need to be able to relax for things like urination, bowel movements, and even sexual intercourse. So this very unique system needs to be able to function in a lot of different capacities. So, and something that's really important to mention here, and this is why I didn't think it affected me, because my first child was not a vaginal birth. He was a cesarean section. But I remember dealing with incontinence after his birth. So when I deadlifted, I would urinate. When I vomited, I would urinate, like I would literally pee on the floor as I threw up. And I thought it can't be pelvic floor because I didn't have a vaginal birth, and I thought that's what it meant. And so obviously this is just normal, right? I didn't know, and you might not know. And that's why I'm talking about this tonight. So pelvic floor muscles get damaged through a variety of ways. So obviously the first one is strain. So if you are straining in pregnancy, of course it gets strained. Everything gets stretched and pushed and contorted into different positions, and there's less room for our bladder, so our bladder has to, is impacted as well. But also if you strain for bowel movements, if you're constantly constipated, if you've had a child, if you've given birth and you have had an assisted birth, so forceps were used, or if you had an episiotomy, or even if you had excessive tearing. And I had excessive tearing with my second child, who was a vaginal birth, so that's why I kind of ended up in that situation all over again with a weak pelvic floor, even though I had repaired it sort of the first time. So this is, and also I need to mention that, and this is why I have notes, see, this is really important, prostate cancer treatment, I didn't know that causes weakness there too, and obesity. And so a lot of the population has had experience with obesity, and so this is really important. So you may never have been pregnant and could still be impacted by pelvic floor weakness. So anyway, this is how they get damaged. So knowing that regardless of whether you've been pregnant or had a child or not, you can have a damaged pelvic floor, it's important to know that this is repairable because the pelvic floor is part of your core. And this was something that I always thought, another reason I thought that I was immune to this, because as a competitive lifter, I had a very strong core. I had to have a very strong core. What I would learn is that just because you have a strong core the core goes from the bottom of the diaphragm all the way down to your TA muscles, right? And so obviously, since it lands on your pelvic floor, if you are a competitive lifter, or you are a lifter at all, regardless of being competitive, you're using a lot of your upper abdominal muscles. So you could very well be neglecting those muscles, the TAs, the underlying muscles. In fact, unless you do a lot of body weight movement, you probably do experience weakness in that area anyway. And so something else that I want to bring to your attention is if you use a belt to lift with, you are definitely removing your TAs from the equation by making them not have to work because you're utilizing that belt. So you're getting stronger in your upper abdominals, but not your TAs, and that means that your upper abdominals will be the priority recruitment muscle regardless of your activities. So even if you do get into body weight work later on, your TAs aren't used to working. They're used to your upper abdominals taking over, and they will. So of course they can't get stronger. So something else that I have heard a lot, and the reason I want to talk about this is I've heard people say, but I do Kegels, so this can't apply to me. And here, there's so much to say about the whole Kegel equation. But basically, Kegels are not always indicated for pelvic floor problems because, as I mentioned, this is a relaxation and a strengthening function, right? So strengthening a muscle and not allowing it to relax is counterproductive if that's your issue. And the thing about Kegels even is that if they aren't performed correctly, then what are you squeezing your vaginal wall for 100 times a day, right? So, and here's the really important factor. You can have a weak pelvic floor or you can have a tense pelvic floor. Both cause problems. And this is why I have my trusty piece of paper. So if you have weak pelvic floor muscles, you could experience accidental leaking when you exercise, cough, or sneeze. You can have that urgency and maybe not getting to the toilet in time, constantly needing to go to the toilet, like never feeling like your bladder is empty, and accidentally losing control of your bladder or your bowel, and sneaky gas. So those are all indicative of weak pelvic floor. Now, on the opposite end, a tight pelvic floor is problematic too, and you can have both. I had both working on it. So, and the symptoms that are related here are urinary frequency and urgency, hesitancy, stopping and starting of urine, painful urination, constipation, straining, and pain with bowel movements. And this was the big one for me, and my big aha moment was unexplained pain in my low back and my pelvic region and hips. And this has been a source of tension for me for a really long time, and it was getting worse and worse and worse, and that was how I ended up seeking out help in this area in the first place. So, and again, on the note of doing Kegels, when your pelvic floor muscles are tight and weak, the tension has to be treated before the weakness, because if you can't let go to access your pelvic floor muscles, you cannot activate your TA, and that was the problem with me. So if you're doing Kegels because you think that that's the key to pelvic floor weakness, but your problem is actually tension, you're making it worse. You're not even accessing. Your Kegels might be moving the vaginal wall, but they aren't necessarily connecting to the pelvic floor. It is not a given that one is connected to the other. And this is really, it's not new information, but this is like in the last 5 years has come to the forefront of our knowledge base in the pelvic floor, I guess, community. So now, and again, the reason that this came to my attention in the first place was that low back pain. So here's what happened. I went to the pelvic floor physio, and I was laying on the table, and the exam, by the way, is very hands-on. So you will have an internal exam. So if you have a vagina, the vagina will be entered and you'll be asked to contract in certain ways in order for the tension to be observed. So this is a really important part of the process, though. And for me, I couldn't relax. I had nothing but muscle tension. And in fact, when the physician's hands were there, fingers, not hands, it's not like that situation, I kept spasming because my problem was tension in one area and weakness in another. So, all that being said, my point being, you will have an internal examination. And if you go to a pelvic floor physio and you do not have an internal examination, please understand that there are so many elements to pelvic floor stability that without an internal exam, they really can't assess all of it. Also important to note that you're going to be assessed on your ability to contract and relax muscles, but your bones and your muscles of your lower back, hip, and sacroiliac joints are going to need to be examined as well, because these joints can stress your pelvic floor muscles. So again, if you're an athlete, this is 100% up your alley. You need to stop watching this video, research pelvic floor physio in your area, call them, make sure they do internal exams, and go make an appointment. Worst case scenario, you're told, nah, this is fine, this might be something else, but I have to tell you that this is the least understood thing that I hear about, and I, with all of the knowledge that I have of the body, was not even remotely aware to the depth that I am now, and I'm still learning. So I'm going to talk about this in a podcast episode that's going to come out on Friday, but I'm going to talk about my experience, and just a little bit of that is that I had so little ability to relax. I learned that my diaphragm does not even move when I breathe. I breathe in my chest. And so I had so much tension everywhere that I was going to get worse and worse and worse and call it back pain and not relate it whatsoever to my pelvic floor. So anyway, that's that. This is way too much information for today. So do what I said, research it, call, make an appointment, doesn't matter, men, women, any of you have a pelvic floor, you need to have that looked at, because I promise you there are so many connections and it can answer so many things that you've been wondering about your own physical health. That's it for now. Take care, everyone. See you next week.